The tension is palpable as a new chapter unfolds. The Iranian parliament has issued a bold declaration regarding the Strait of Hormuz in retaliation for the U.S. bombing in Iran, echoing a move from 1984 during the Iran-Iraq War when Iran sought to block it, only for America and Gulf nations to force its reopening. I ask you this: do you understand the strategic importance of the Hormuz Strait, which Iran currently controls? One side borders Oman, the other Iran. Glance at any map and you'll see its critical role as a lifeline for global oil, a narrow choke point where over 20 million barrels pass daily. This is why I stress it's an Omani border issue, not just Iran's to wield, given the delicate balance of power in the region. If Iran dares to close it now, just watch how the pro-Iranian voices in India, especially those who've passionately defended Iran through rallies and social media campaigns, will squirm under the pressure. Many Indian media outlets and workers rely heavily on Gulf nations like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE for their economic survival, with millions earning livelihoods through remittances exceeding $80 billion annually and trade links worth billions more. So, when I challenge Iran's supporters in India with, "What's your backup plan if Iran blockades Hormuz?" my question cuts deep. They've boasted Iran can shut it down, citing its military prowess, but let's see their stance when reality hits hard, disrupting supply chains and livelihoods across India. If Iran closes Hormuz even briefly, the global energy market will convulse with chaos, sending shockwaves far beyond the Middle East. Every nation, including India, will feel the impact, with oil prices potentially spiking by 50% or more, pushing fuel costs to record highs and triggering inflation that could erode household budgets by thousands of rupees yearly. Gulf economies will collapse first, as this strait handles nearly a third of the world's oil supply, a lifeline for nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, whose GDPs could drop by 20 to 30% within weeks. This isn't a minor issue, it's an economic game changer with historical echoes. Remember how Arab nations turned against Saddam Hussein during the Gulf War when he threatened oil routes? History will repeat itself. Iran's border with Iraq hosts 5 U.S. military bases within 10 kilometer to 400 kilometers range, and across the Middle East, 22 U.S. bases station $45,000, 50,000 troops, a formidable force equipped with advanced drones and missile systems. If Iran blockades Hormuz, mark my words, within 1 month, a U.S.-led coalition with Arab partners, potentially including Egypt and Jordan, will seize northern Iran, including the Hormuz region. They'll carve it out. Guaranteed. Why? Because Hormuz isn't just a waterway. It's the world's most vital energy artery, and no nation can afford its closure without dire consequences. China might offer verbal support to Iran, leveraging its diplomatic ties, but their $400 billion trade with Gulf states will keep them from direct action, prioritizing economic stability over ideology. Iranian diplomacy, notorious for saying one thing and doing the opposite, such as promising peace talks while advancing nuclear programs, further erodes trust, making their threats a hollow bluff. Here's the reality check. Iran's own population largely opposes its regime, with protests escalating since 2022 over economic hardship, fuel shortages, and brutal crackdowns, drawing millions into the streets. The moment Hormuz is blockaded, internal factions, Kurds in the northwest, Baloch in the southeast, will splinter, fueled by decades of discontent and inspired by past uprisings like the 2009 Green Movement. Iran will fracture into 2 entities, with the northern Hormuz-adjacent territories becoming independent under U.S. Arab stewardship, potentially forming a new state allied with Gulf monarchies. This isn't speculation, it's geopolitical inevitability, driven by the same dynamics that saw America intervene when Saddam invaded Kuwait and reached Khafji, just 15 kilometers from Saudi borders, prompting Operation Desert Storm. Today, Gulf nations pay billions annually for U.S. military protection, over $10 billion in recent defense pacts, because their survival hinges on stable oil trade. If Hormuz closes, these countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Bahrain, will starve economically, their markets crashing as oil revenues dry up, affecting global stock indices like the Sensex. The Houthis will crumble under intensified U.S. counterstrikes. markets will collapse with oil futures soaring past $150 per barrel, and India's pro-Iran commentators will scramble to justify their miscalculations as remittances dry up, leaving families in Kerala and Tamil Nadu in distress. Iran's leadership is dangerously delusional, their theocratic obsession blinding them to reality, a mindset reinforced by decades of isolationist policies under the Ayatollah's rule. Despite decades of development, they've squandered every opportunity for negotiated settlements, rejecting UN proposals in 2015 and 2020 that could have eased sanctions and opened trade, opting instead for defiance that led to crippling economic penalties. Now, facing complete isolation, with even China and Russia offering only token support, such as limited oil purchases, Iran stands alone. Russia, bogged down in Ukraine with its economy strained by sanctions and military losses, can't rescue them, its resources stretched thin. France and Germany have abandoned Iran, joining Europe in universal condemnation over its nuclear defiance, human rights abuses, and support for terrorism, with the EU imposing fresh sanctions in 2023. If Iran provokes a Hormuz crisis, the result will be national fragmentation, with northern territories liberated and the world witnessing Iran's balkanization, potentially into 3 or 4 states, as ethnic groups like the Kurds and Baloch seek autonomy, mirroring the ethnic divisions that fractured Yugoslavia in the 1990s. This could lead to a prolonged conflict, with refugee flows straining neighboring Turkey and Pakistan, already hosting millions. This is the endgame. Iran's bluffing era is over. Its military weakened by recent US and Israeli strikes that demolished key infrastructure. When the US bombed their nuclear sites, not a single nation stood with them, a stark contrast to their boasts of an axis of resistance with Syria and Hezbollah, now fractured and ineffective. Now, any move on Hormuz will trigger their dissolution, with US naval fleets backed by 10 aircraft carriers and 50,000 sailors in the region, ready to enforce a blockade supported by Saudi and Emirati naval forces. The so-called axis of resistance will implode, with Hezbollah losing Iranian funding and the Houthis facing annihilation, while India's pro-Iran voices will face a reckoning. Their Gulf paymasters, who employ over 8 million Indians and contribute 2.5% to India's GDP, won't tolerate such folly. The message is clear. Iran is playing with fire while drenched in gasoline, its military depleted, its economy in free fall, with inflation hitting 50% in 2024. Their next mistake will be their last, potentially sparking a refugee crisis affecting 2 million Iranians, straining regional stability, and reshaping Middle Eastern alliances as Turkey and Pakistan grapple with border pressures. This could also disrupt India's $50 billion trade with the Gulf, forcing a reevaluation of its foreign policy. Stay tuned as this unfolds, a pivotal moment shaping the Middle East's future and India's economic ties.